Thanks very much for saving this for the culmination of the afternoon, our most liked planning program in the county. We joke around that it's a four-letter word, but it's a four-number word. It certainly arouses passions in various folks, and that has to do with its long history. I'd like to walk you through some background on 2050. Talk a little bit about just the main intent behind it, and then we're also in the midst of an evaluation of 2050 presently, so we'll touch on that a little bit. Let me just start with a little bit of history and some orientation. I think that's some helpful background for everyone who may be listening here. This is the county's first long-range plan from 1975, and I just wanted to point out that there are a few things here that are really worth kind of recognizing. First is the initial kind of settlement areas within Sarasota County. You see Sarasota with the oranges, Venice, and Northport and Inglewood. Those are the historically settled areas of Sarasota County, and not a whole lot in between. And the second thing to point out is in 1975, this was an alignment showing up for I-75. It wasn't built. But early in Sarasota County's planning, I-75 was seen as an opportunity to be able to have an alignment such that urban densities would be west of the alignment of I-75, and then rural areas would be east of I-75. So moving forward to 1981, this is the county's long-range or future land use plan. A little bit of change in coloring, more of a circular radiating type pattern coming out from the various cities. We're still doing planning at that point, I believe, for the cities. You don't see the cities grayed out on the long-range plans. But this deliberate strategy in showing up in 1981, I think I-75 was under construction. You'll see the oranges and reds where urban density would take place inside west of I-75, and then a lot of the green in the eastern part of the county being where Sarasota County would be rural. Moving on to the 1989 long range or future land use plan. This is generally the blueprint that we still operate under today, and you'll see future land use maps from thereafter looking very similar to this. Bulk of western Sarasota County planned for residential infill commercial centers. If you've got really good eyesight, you'll see an expansion of urban development east of I-75, a little bit south of Fruitville Road. It's Palmer Road down to Clark Road. And then some purple colors for new employment centers east of I-75, taking advantage now in this time period where I-75 was actually built. Fast forward here to today, skipping a couple of other major updates to our comprehensive plan, and this is what the county's long-range or future land use plan looks like today. You'll see an urban service boundary in blue that generally runs along the same area that it did back in 1989. This is the area where the county prioritized capital expenditures and where urban development is allowed west of that line. In the southern part of the county, it's filling in with kind of a bluish color here as an area designated as future urban, south of Venice, north of Inglewood, wrapping around the western part of Northport. And then in the eastern part of the county, varying shades of green signifying either publicly owned lands in the brighter green or rural densities in the army-colored green, where very low densities, 1 unit per 5 acres at its most intense, is allowed. So this is an option for Sarasota County's future. With this slide here, in no way am I expecting that you'd read any of this, but I just wanted to give a sense that there was a long period of development of what became 2050. And that really started after the 1989 future land use plan that you just saw. There was a recognition at that time that there would be continuing development pressures, dwindling larger land supply, and that would continue to create pressure to expand that urban service boundary that the county's had for a long time continually eastward. There was a policy that was created in the early to mid 1990s that called for the development of a build-out plan for Sarasota County. And so a number of different efforts over a multi-year period led to a consensus, and I think many would characterize it as a compromise adoption of what became the plan called 2050. What we're looking at here are some very real concerns that were taking place at the time 2050 was being developed, that the long-range plan for Sarasota County, which is in the lower left-hand corner, has this rural land use designation that allows for 1 unit for every 5 acres, that if you were to look at build-out, and at the time in the 1990s there were a number of these 5-acre kind of ranchette type developments that were being built, this could be a potential. The county could build out, at least according to its long-range plan, in 5 acres. The 2050 plan was an alternative to that, and it's a concentrated form of development. And I know these are kind of small maps, but in the lower right-hand corner, the intent behind showing that is that the alternative is to concentrate development, have connectivity of environmental systems, and so that's what the 2050 plan is. Looking at it another way here, this is a graphic depiction of how 2050 works. In the planning world, 2050 is referred to as an overlay. It floats over the top of the existing future land use plan of Sarasota County. So one can develop according to what's allowed under the current future land use plan, or one could choose to make use of the incentives to develop according to what the 2050 plan allows for. This was adopted as a build-out plan for Sarasota County, and it's the preferred future. It does not cover the cities of Sarasota County. This only applies to the unincorporated parts of the county. And just in brief here, a shorthand of what is Sarasota County 2050. It's an incentive-oriented plan. It recognizes that Sarasota County is going to continue to grow, that economic development is important, but it places an emphasis really on the quality of life and the form of development that it takes, recognizing the importance of having opportunities to have connected environmental systems, and then having fiscal demands that are associated with development pay for itself. Where 2050 applies, it applies to the entire unincorporated county. The focus, I think as you're all aware, has not been on the entire county. It's been on the development form that allows for urban development east of I-75, which is the county's urban service boundary. And those are the two, and the terminology that's used is resource management area. Those are the two in the lower right-hand corner that we're looking at in terms of an evaluation, and that really has been the focus of when people refer to 2050. There are certainly policies and actions that the county has for inside the urban service boundary, but the entire focus has really been on both of the two in the lower right-hand corner, Greenway and Village Open Space. So starting with Greenway here, in the potential for urban development in Sarasota County, this is the backbone. The Greenway Resource Management Area was identified first in the development of 2050. It identified important habitat, water features, floodplains, and then opportunities to have connected systems. So connected systems to publicly owned lands, and then what you're seeing on this map hopefully is two different colors here. Lighter green color are private opportunities to be able to incentivize connected systems, and then the darker color green being the land that's already in public ownership. So opportunities to connect that private to publicly owned lands. This map then shows the areas that are outside of the greenways. This is the village open space. They're not presently developed with any large lot subdivisions that are called rural heritage in the 2050 terminology, large lot subdivisions. So this is the area that's left over, if you will, that could potentially be suitable for more urban development. Just looking at a better map that provides a color distinction, at least between the two types of urban development that's allowed. There's a form called villages that's in the darker blue color. There's 3 areas that are identified for that. One north of Fruitville Road, and let's see if I can move the cursor here. So this is I-75, here's Fruitville Road. One village area north of Fruitville Road, between Fruitville and Clark Road, another village area in dark blue, and then south of Clark Road, a 3rd area for village development. Then in eastern Sarasota County, this lighter blue color is another village open space form of development that's a little bit less intensive called hamlets. I won't stay on this one long, but I know from looking at these maps, it's difficult to tell how big are these areas here. The city of Sarasota, for example, is about 10,000 acres in size. These are significant size pieces of property. There's about 16,000 acres of hamlets and 16,000 acres of village area. So I just wanted to at least give you a sense of scale. It's hard to tell from those maps just how big are these areas. They're significant size. Getting into, and I'll be real brief running through this here, how development works in the Village Open Space in 2050. We refer to it as the three legs of the stool. There's a prioritization of protecting open space and connected environmental systems. This is incentivized by giving higher densities in those village open space areas. And then in return, what the county has asked for, and this is county citizens through that long history that I went over very, very quickly, that in return that the form of development prioritizes walkability, which falls under a couple different names. We refer to it in the planning world as new urbanism, but it's a way of looking at having mixture of uses, residential, non-residential uses nearby that is very much like old urbanism in small towns and cities across the country. And then finally, that there's a higher responsibility that would be put on these new developments in terms of paying for their impacts. So the greenways, we saw an image earlier of connection opportunities within the county. There's also opportunities to have connections beyond Sarasota County, and then leaving behind in white the areas that could potentially be more suitable for development. Density is derived from required amounts of open space, and there are habitat types that give you density values when you move in from the open space, either on-site or off-site. And that terminology is called transfer of development rights. There are certain habitat types in the county that were prioritized for protection, and they get higher density values. You can get up to 2 dwelling units per acre for certain high-value habitats like high dry scrub, for example. And then the intent here overall in 2050 was that there would be a overall pool of development, and that's what's intended to be shown here by all these dots, is that under the existing land use plan, there's a potential for a certain number of dwelling units, and the idea was to be able to concentrate those into areas that could potentially be better served by urban services, and then have those other factors that fall under that umbrella of new urbanism. And I'm trying to move along real quickly then so we can get to discussion. The form of development shown here, this is a prototypical kind of graphic for villages. It was written both in the comprehensive plan and in the zoning code to be very, very explicit as to how development was to occur, and including requirements for all of those things here that are on the slide. The less intensive form of development called hamlets. They're smaller in scale, more rural in character, larger lots, larger requirements for open space, and then overall developments on development size. 2050 was adopted with requirements for developments to be able to determine what their fiscal impacts for these 15 items, and they run from transportation down to public hospitals, and then to provide mechanisms to be able to pay for these identified costs, both initially, while something's under development, and then ongoing. And this is the requirement called fiscal neutrality. It's also part of the evaluation that we're doing. And then getting into the evaluation, just real briefly, I'll mention that we are in the midst of evaluating the details of 2050, not necessarily these broader intents that we just went over. We're looking at potential changes to certain zoning code requirements and to comprehensive plan policies. There was a scope of work that was approved back in July that we're looking at. It's available on the county's website at scgov.net, keyword 2050. So along with all the background that we have on the county's website, there are reports that will be made available for each one of the items that we'll be evaluating, and we absolutely encourage review, feedback, critique, et cetera, of that. There are some actions that are coming up here fairly quickly on the first grouping of items that deal with zoning code amendments. There's a public hearing before the Planning Commission on November 7th. That'll be in Venice. And then a public hearing before the Board of County Commissioners on November 20th. The second grouping of items that include things that are in the comprehensive plan, we've got neighborhood workshops coming up, 3 of them in December. I believe they're December 4th, December 10th, and December 12th. And then we'll get into public hearings on those in January with the Planning Commission and then February with the Board of County Commissioners. Thank you very much, and I'm available to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Questions for Mr. Parsons? Commissioner Chapman.
Mr. Parsons, it's my understanding that the urban-suburban RMA requires planning alliances, and they haven't actually been implemented. Is that right?
There is a policy, that was actually brought to my attention here recently that the language would seem to indicate that there's a call for what looks like a formalized kind of planning alliance, and no, we have not forged any kind of formal planning alliance.
And what would it take from a staffing point of view to implement something like that?
Well, I would say that we do have really good coordination with the city of Sarasota, all the municipalities in the county on on an ongoing basis for all kinds of development, long-range planning items that we look at with population projections and so forth. So setting up, more of a formalized kind of planning alliance, I don't have a sense of what that would take. I don't think it would take much. We already coordinate regularly with the planning departments, at least, of all the municipalities.
I would guess that city commissioners would say there hasn't been much coordination with the 2050, but I'm really interested in more, and so maybe this would be a method for better coordination, and I'm just wondering what you perceive the planning alliances would look like.
It's new to me, so I'm not sure that I have the best picture in mind, but I think it would be some kind of regular meetings amongst staff, and we do that on other items. So I don't think it would be an extra large burden to be able to do that.
Commissioner Robinson.
I'm actually really surprised to hear you say that, Commissioner Chapman. I was a member of the Council of Governments last year with then Mayor Atwell, and several times we brought in county staff to update the Council of Governments on 2050 and what was going on, including telling when the meetings were, what was going on, what the next step was. Happened all year last year. I'm not a member this year. Chair Mason is now, but it's something that occurred all year last year at various meetings and came up a lot. If not every other meeting, pretty close to that, we brought up what was going on with 2050 since it started going again. So I'm surprised to hear that you didn't know that, because I witnessed the entire Council of Governments updated on it, which would include all the governments in Sarasota County that participate in it, because we thought they all should know.
But hasn't most of the work been done this year? No, starting with last year with what was going on with the public meetings, the update of what was being looked at. No, that was last year that happened. So and I know she was engaged in it. She was very good in being engaged in it, Mayor Atwell was. She asked questions and things like that. So I just might have to disagree with you on that particular issue because of what happened at the Council of Government meetings.
Commissioner Barbetta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 2050 goes back to 2000. Commissioner Patterson and I were the only two involved in it. I was never a fan of 2050. I was a low no vote against 2050. It was 8-1 on the Planning Commission and 5-0 on the County Commission for it. But it's the law, and we're living with it. But I do want you to know that, and Alan, were you with the city at that time?
Yeah, I was with the city in '99, so okay. Yes.
So Harvey Hoagland, Mike Taylor, I think Karen Murphy.
Doug James
were intimately involved with 2050 all through that process. And that was a tough process because it was several years of finalizing meetings, et cetera, then 2 years of lawsuits with Mr. Lobeck, and then finalization of the plan. And city staff was always involved, and they were great planners. Everybody was really good about it. It's only recently, the past couple of years, that some changes have been proposed. And again, as Commissioner Robinson pointed out, planning staff has been kept informed. So I'm a little confused at this 11th hour stuff, but we've got meetings coming up, and I welcome any of the city commissioners or any of the city planning staff to join in the workshops and the meetings. We got nothing to hide.
Commissioner Chapman.
Well, what about the planning staffs being more intimately involved? And I'm not just talking about the Council of Government. I'm talking about the planning staffs of all of the urban, suburban RMAs with these meetings, with the development community, with these internal meetings. I think that's where much of the footwork, I would say. And what about the planning boards of these various municipalities and the planning commission of the city working together on the details?
Are you asking that question of?
Yeah, I'm just asking that in general. Can we implement this on a much more staff, planning board, planning commission level that is much more related to the actual footwork, I would call the day-to-day application of the update?
I would say from our part, we're happy to meet with anyone, anytime, anywhere. We have been in coordination with city staff here much more recently, but and I know you had a presentation from a staff person last night that has had to really cram over the past week or two to pull together an understanding on that. So anything that we can do to increase, knowledge, understanding, and opportunity for us to get feedback, we are into it.
And it would be nice, the other urban, suburban RMAs as well. I'd rather not have a fight at the end. I'd much prefer to work out these problems beforehand.
One other thing I might add to that, too, is that, while the focus of the evaluation that we're looking at now is on this urban development in eastern Sarasota County, you're absolutely right that there are policies that the county has in the urban-suburban resource management area that we absolutely want to turn our attention to. We're excited about, opportunities to be able to coordinate with the form-based coding effort that the city has going on, and we very much want to turn our attention to infill redevelopment in the county, and obviously that'll take much more coordination going forward, too.
Anything else? Mr. Parsons, Commissioner Atwell.
Yeah, and just to add to that, the city's going through all kinds of initiatives. Whether it's the CRA, what we do with the CRA extension, form-based code, our mobility study, all this has. I think what are the relationships between all these initiatives and all that's going on in the city to the eventual whatever we do with 2050. That's what I want. And to me, there can't be enough information. And how it affects the city. Of course, I know a lot of the text amendment, this is a long process, but I want to know how it affects us, how it affects infill, redevelopment, and all the things that we're doing must have some effect. 2050 will have some effect on this, especially infill. So that's all I'm asking is that this is a constant, how does it affect the city? That's all
Commissioner Barbette.
Madam Chair, that's a function of the city staff. Just like they did with BRT, we've worked together on BRT. We work together on the MPO and the roundabouts. We don't ask for special presentations by you guys to us. We participate in the process. We've worked on all those. Your staff was intimately involved in 2050. They knew the effects on the city. Nothing's changed. None of that's changed. All we're changing proposals are mechanisms to make it work, because we got $4 million invested in it and it isn't working, and we owe it to the taxpayers to make it work. The plan is from 2002 to now, it's almost 14 or 12 years old. Now, the argument is it didn't really take effect in 2004. Fine, then it's 9 years old, but it's not working, and we're tweaking it to make it work. We're not doing anything drastic, but we have meetings. Show up at the meetings. Have your planning staff come to the meetings. You have a great planning staff. Karen Murphy probably knows more about 2050 than most of us. Alan probably does also. And I know Harvey and Mike do. They're not there anymore, but you've got great planners. Bring them into the process. We welcome. And sure, we want more density. You heard me before, in the city. We've never been against that. We want you to increase your tax base.
Commissioner Robbins.
Yeah, I'm really glad to see you getting engaged. The city of Venice used those council of government opportunities to send a position letter to us, the same meeting. So I'm happy to see that you all are engaged, because that was the purpose of doing those meetings, and they've taken advantage of that opportunity and actually have done that with us, and actually individually met with, I know they've asked me questions on it, and they've been really engaged on this issue as a result of those meetings. So I'm pleased to see that you all are getting involved in it and getting engaged in it. I would encourage, I've talked with several different other elected officials in the county about it, and they tend to turn to me more in the southern part, but I encourage it. I think it's a great thing that we have these discussions and that it allowed them to form an opinion to be able to send to us.
I guess we're engaged a little bit in tautology, because there is this requirement in 2050 that we have planning alliances, and certainly when we get to the issue of fiscal neutrality and the investigation of changing fiscal neutrality, that is going to have a major impact on the municipalities, because several of the municipalities are donors, tax donors to the county. I wonder why we can't start conceptually creating a planning alliance as required.
Municipalities are part of the county, by the way.
I know that. I understand that.
Yeah, they're not tax donors to the county either.
Commissioner
And it breaks
Patterson.
even.
Yeah, guys, I'm not even sure what a planning alliance is. I don't remember putting that into the 2050 plan. I have no doubt that it is there. But if y'all want to be involved, maybe talk about how that would work, and if we put it in the plan and we were negligent about making it work, it's kind of hard to have that discussion right now for me, because I'm not sure what it is that would make you feel like we had fulfilled that promise. I'm not sure that it wasn't just something put in there by the planner that we didn't pay a whole lot of attention to and nodded our heads. But I sat through at the county commission meeting, endless meetings on 2050, and there were city representatives there at some times, and there were certain things the city found to be problematic. For example, it was designated that the land that you owned for your spray fields out east, a couple of thousand of pretty valuable acres, were actually designated in the 2050 plan as land that would be nothing but greenway and would never be touched. And when the city discovered that, they were pretty unhappy, understandably. So it's not like this was this total vacuum. But if you all conceive of a way that you'd like to interact with us, I'm sure we'd be open to that discussion.
Absolutely.
And I think that discussion, since it is about staffs and staff times, needs to be had with the administrator and the city manager.
Remember, if we really didn't want to do it, we could actually take it out, and that would be within our power. We just haven't really focused on it.
Anything else? 2050. Okay, well, this has been enlightening.
Enlightening.
The timing is.
I know, I'm getting there. I'm not adjourning.
Good job.
These two speakers wouldn't let me. I wanted to take this opportunity to thank the City Commission and its staff for this meeting today. And
Don't we have to have it open to the public?
we should do it more often. We are at Open to the Public on our agenda, and I have two speaker cards.
That's right, you do it at the end here.
Kathy Benz and Kathy Antunes. And it looks like another one coming up. If you would state your name for the record and that you've signed a card, you have 3 minutes.
My name is Kathy Benz, and I did sign a card. I also was a participant in the process of 2050 over that long, incredible amount of time. And what Mr. Parsons said about it being a compromise is absolutely accurate. It was developers, it was the citizens, it was the municipal and the county government planning departments that all participated. The fact that there are proposals right now for changes to that without going back and opening up that dialogue again is what I see as a real problem. If you're going to propose changes to the 2050 that was honed through that complex a process, you need to, again, have public discussion and input, municipal and county input, and you have to enable us to critique what you're planning. My view of the proposed changes is that they have will have a detrimental effect on our municipal areas, but they will also have a detrimental effect on the plan for hamlets and villages in the 2050 plan, because it's going to skew their development totally contrary to the principles that are fundamental to 2050, and that is the concentration of these areas into walkable communities. And if you're going to have them as hamlets and villages separate from the urban areas, that's the whole principle. To make them an extension of urban development is contrary to the principle of the whole plan to start off with. And I think the appeal has to be made to, if you're going to propose changes, then open it all back up.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kathy Antunes, and I'm just commenting and want to share the specific policy in 2050. It's policy US 5.1, a county municipal coordinated planning program. So whatever standards are in place for programs, it seems like that is a more formal process than conversations or updates. And as a city resident and a dual tax city resident, one of the objectives is the status and strengthening of existing communities. It is concerning to those of us who happily pay twice our taxes to not see a coordinated, your map, for instance, of total potential housing units doesn't include any of the incorporated areas. So you've got 34,000, over 34,000 within the urban service area approved housing units, which is more than 200% of projected 10-year demand. Northport adds 70,000 units to that. Why don't you have a map that shows everything? That's coordination. That's what a program does. And I don't see it. And that has huge long-term economic implications that must not be ignored. Thank you.
Thank you. Jerry Swarmstead.
Thank you. This has been a most interesting afternoon. And I really loved the presentation of 2050. It looked better than I thought it did before. And I was particularly struck with the three-legged stool. I hate to see a few legs chopped off because that's what it looks like we're doing. And I think we really can't do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, any more cards? Any other business to come before this body? Seeing none, thank you all so much. We're adjourned.